Here we go, episode 15 of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And this is the place, I was thinking about this, Keith. This is the place, if people don't want to turn on their 24-hour news channel and they want to get a quick view of what went on in the past week and what's coming up in the next week in politics, they can do that here and get a 20-minute view of it and not have to watch anything else, right?
Absolutely. You can avoid all the sanctimoniousness on Fox and CNN and MSNBC and get right to the straight issues right now and then go out and have fun.
Yeah, and we have fun doing it, or try to have fun. Let us start with the Michigan wrap-up. We had Michigan last week. You've got some thoughts on what happened over there.
Well, we had the Michigan primary, and Donald Trump defeated Nikki Haley decisively. Joe Biden was running against an uncommitted slate that had support from some of the congressional delegation. The uncommitted slate in Michigan received 101,000 votes. Now, to put that number in perspective, Donald Trump carried the state in 2016 by 10,000 votes. Joe Biden carried it in 2020 by 150,000 votes. So that is a significant number that spells danger to Joe Biden. So there was a very significant portion of Democrats in very strategically located places who voted against Joe Biden or voted uncommitted as a protest to Joe Biden in the Michigan primary. But here's the other statistic that is even more troubling, I think, to the Biden campaign. Joe Biden received 623,000 votes. Donald Trump, who had a significant Republican opponent, 758,000 votes. So Trump by himself exceeded the total of Biden and uncommitted, not to mention the 293,000 votes who voted for Haley. So there is a looming enthusiasm gap amongst Democrats. Republican turnout, by the way, is also off, but it's not off by the same magnitude as we're seeing in the Democratic primary. And that is a real issue. And just to set the stage, because we have upcoming the California primary, Mike, there's 22 million voters in California, 39 million people. As of yesterday, and in today's way that we do elections, about 60% of the voters are going to vote before Election Day. Would you care to guess how many have voted so far as of yesterday?
I haven't a clue.
2.5 million. So roughly 11% of Californians have voted. So if that is anywhere close to half, that means we're looking at a 20%, 25%, 30% voter turnout for the California primary. So in a state of 39 million people, less than 10 million people are going to be maybe making the choice of who the next president's going to be. Those are sobering numbers for anybody's political campaign, but they speak to a widespread sense of voter angst with this election and disinterest.
So Super Tuesday's coming up. How many states are we talking about here?
I think there's something on the order of 12 states. It may vary a little bit by party. When we get past Super Tuesday, it will be prohibitively impossible for a challenger, which the only one really standing is Nikki Haley, to achieve a convention vote majority going into the conventions. From a mathematical perspective, it will be pretty impossible for her to say she's running to achieve a majority.
But this is a different kind of race this year because we have all of the Trump baggage that has to be dealt with and will be dealt with, some of it, by the time the convention gets there. So that's part of the reason she's staying in, right?
That's exactly right. There's heavy betting on both sides that Biden or Trump will not be the ultimate nominee. With Trump, it is existential because he's going to be in court. He could very much be in jail on Election Day. I mean, literally. And we've never had a circumstance like that.
You also pointed out to me before we started that DeSantis is kind of rumbling about getting back into the fight.
Unlike Tim Scott, who dropped out of the race and immediately became a sycophant to Trump, DeSantis sort of dropped out, said, I endorse Trump, and then sort of went away and didn't make any appearances or any of that. He had a conference call with his supporters and basically was negative on the Trump campaign and on Trump's ability to win the election in November. And word of that leaked to the Trump campaign, and they immediately started trashing DeSantis in the usual way that they do. So what you've seen is a little bit of a feud here. And it's fueled speculation that DeSantis is trying to sit himself up. His theory of the race is Nikki Haley is going to have maybe 30% or so of the delegates, but the Trump people will never vote for her. They sort of could be persuaded to vote for me. So I'm going to sort of keep my powder dry, stay on the sidelines, not be a Tim Scott. And I might emerge as the acceptable candidate if the Trump delegates all have to pick a candidate not named Trump. Now, given Donald Trump, he will probably say, pick anybody but Ron DeSantis just to spite him, because that's what he does. But, I mean, people are beginning to make political calculations based on the fact that for the first time ever, we've got a presidential candidate who may very well be sentenced to jail before the election.
And this also must work in conjunction with people that have money to support DeSantis. So those folks who initially pulled the cash are thinking about maybe getting back in?
Well, exactly. So people will look at that and they don't have to make an investment now, but they put a lot of money in and they like to get some return on that. I've spoken to a lot of DeSantis people. They really have no love for Donald Trump either. They just as soon see an alternative and they all want to win. If he has the semblance of viability breathed back into his nostrils, he may in fact attract some support.
Back to Super Tuesday. At the end of the day on Super Tuesday, what are we going to see? I know we're speculating. I know there is some concern about voter turnout in all of the states. What do you think will happen?
Well, voter turnout has been very, very low. It's low in California. It'll be low across the board. I think with the possible exception of the District of Columbia and maybe the Virgin Islands and maybe Massachusetts, Trump will likely run the table on Nikki Haley. And because California will have a winner-take-all rules, and many of the states do have winner-take-all rules, he will be preemptively ahead in terms of the delegate count. At that point, Nikki Haley's got to decide, does she stay in the race as a protest vote? Does she stay in as an alternative to people who can't stomach Trump? Which is, by the way, a significant portion of the Republican Party. No matter how you want to cut it, somewhere between 30 and 40% of Republicans have been voting against Donald Trump and do not want him as the nominee. So there is a constituency for her to hang in there to hold together. But that's going to be a tough decision. It's going to, I think, hinge on her ability to keep money flowing, after Super Tuesday.
And the money obviously is still flowing. Otherwise, she would have ran the other way by now, right?
There's only so many times you can piss off the Republican establishment without them deciding they're going to put a little money in to keep Nikki Haley in the race.
Right.
And that's the problem with Donald Trump. If you think about it, anybody in that position should be trying to focus on unifying the party, bringing in the moderate voters, bringing in the Nikki Haley voters. And he's doing everything he can to alienate them. I mean, I have my Barred Permanently T-shirt from Nikki Haley. I think we talked about that before. Yeah. I'm proud to have it, proud to wear it. And I hope he never sends me another email asking for money for his legal fees.
Fat chance of that. But speaking of Donald Trump, what happened in the Supreme Court here that seems to have...
Well, I think a lot of people were hoping that there would be an expedited decision to not accept the circuit court decision on immunity and let that decision stand. And then they could move and set a schedule for Trump's trial. Instead, the Supreme Court, you need 4 votes on the Supreme Court to decide to hear a case, not a majority, decided to hear it. Now, there are broad national implications, legal implications for getting a definitive ruling from the Supreme Court on the issue of immunity. And so there's reasons why the Supreme Court would accept that, other than people who think that they're just pimping for Trump. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think they wanted to establish the law once and for all, and this was the opportunity to do it. The unfortunate thing is they did not do it on a very expedited schedule, and so that pushes Trump's trial dates out, in some cases, on top of and maybe beyond the election. We shall see. They're in court today arguing about moving up the documents case. The New York case is going to come. They're going to have jury selection at the end of March 25th. So it's only a partial ability to stop the judicial proceedings entirely, but it's going to delay them somewhat. However, we will have a definitive ruling on immunity, and I can't possibly see how Donald Trump is going to win given what he's asked for.
I agree with you on the idea that we need to have a definitive answer on this. They had the opportunity to rule on this in December. when Jack Smith brought it to them initially. And then there's been delays all the way along the line that seem unnecessary when you compare it to other Supreme Court rulings. So I'm not clear on whether they are pimping for him or not, but it looks in my eyes like they are. I agree with you. There needs to be a definitive rule made on this, and that we're going to get, and I think it's going to be obvious.
I would certainly hope it's obvious, because it needs to be clear and cut and dried that presidents are not above the law, that they do not enjoy immense immunity from prosecution, particularly on criminal acts.
The other big story of the past week is Mitch McConnell stepping down. What are your thoughts on that?
The Republicans do not yet know how much they're going to miss the leadership of Mitch McConnell. The Wall Street Journal today has an excellent editorial about his record. He has single-handedly blocked court packing. He's blocked statehood for D.C. He is more than anybody else responsible for the Supreme Court having a conservative majority. He put together a Republican majority of diverse people that's blocked many of Barack Obama's initiatives. He was a master political tactician. If you look at the circus and the clown show in the House of Representatives, and if that bleeds over to the Republican Senate, government is just going to be a disaster. Now, he is vilified and hated by MAGA Republicans.
Right. I was just going to say he's not conservative enough for them.
Again, these are people who don't know what conservative is. He's been steadfast in his support of Ukraine. Among the Putin wing of the party, he is highly unpopular. Right. But he's become sort of the embodiment of establishment Republicans that they all seem to want to hate, because they think he represents the swamp, because he approved a budget, because he approved spending for the military, because he understood that in order to move his Senate caucus, they needed certain things for their states, and he provided them. And these people somehow magically believe that if you didn't do any of that, you could get reelected, the government would work fine, that the other side wouldn't take all the money for their projects, and that the president wouldn't risk roll over you. They're about to learn a new lesson.
Well, it is interesting because all of those things that you cite, I, of course, do not like about what he did. But on the other hand, he understood how to use compromise to get those things.
He certainly did.
Something that the current MAGA people do not understand at all.
And the contrast with what's going on in the House of Representatives versus his record in the Senate is just the most stark and clear and definitive as it could be. Like I say, the Republicans today don't know what they've lost when he steps down. Now, here's the good news. His term runs for another 2 years, and he's in line to be the chairman of the Appropriations Committee if the Republicans take the Senate. And I think he is going to lean back the way John McCain did, and unfettered by the requirements of leadership and having to represent his caucus, he is going to be Mitch McConnell unfiltered.
But the MAGAs will not be happy, probably.
No, they'll never be happy.
He'll still be able to work his magic in certain ways that they will not be happy with.
He'll make government work, and they believe the imperative is to make government be blown up. As he said it, he says, I still have the ability to, make my opponents uncomfortable, and I think he intends to do just that.
And opponents on both sides now.
Exactly.
Okay, a little bit of housekeeping here. RFK is on a couple of ballots. Is that going to be a factor?
RFK Jr. qualified for the Georgia and the Arizona ballot. Now, both of those states were very close. So, 10,000, 20,000 votes here or there can make a difference. It is unclear whether RFK Jr. helps or hurts Biden. And it's unclear whether the help or hurt Biden is jurisdictional. In other words, he could help Biden in some states, hurt him in others.
Sure.
And so we're all sort of waiting to see how the polls show that figures things out. But in a close election, somebody getting 10,000 votes makes a big difference.
And the voter apathy probably plays into this uncertainty about where those votes will end up, right?
Very much so, because this is going to be a turnout election. In 2020, we had one of the biggest turnouts, I guess, in history. In fact, Joe Biden got the highest number of votes of any presidential candidate ever, and Donald Trump got the second highest total ever in a losing effort. So there was massive voter turnout. And what we're seeing in the primaries is there is massive voter apathy. So it's going to be a very, very down to the wire, who can get their voters out kind of election to see who wins. and third or fourth or fifth party candidates on the ballot can be very impactful in that.
I think we've covered pretty much everything that happened the past week, and we will have a lot to talk about next week, right? After Super Tuesday?
We will. The smoke will be cleared. Some candidates will be smoldering.
Okay. And remember, this is the place that you can get it all condensed into a short little podcast, and you don't have to watch the rest of those knuckleheads on TV. Subscribe to the podcast, Red versus Blue. We're on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.